Right. And so I can see, by the way, that you can tell that I've been working from home, because of my beard growth, whereas you still look handsome and clean
Well,
shaven because you're going into work and seeing
this,
patients.
but you know what's funny though is that this is only as of like last weekend because I've been masked the entire time, so people can see your facial hair anyway.
That's true. Yeah, but you don't get as good a seal with the tape. So we are
Yeah.
live. So I'm just going to say, welcome everybody to Professional Novice. I'm here. I'm the Professional Novice. My name is Ali Rizvi, and well, I'm going to start introducing my guest today. I think that you are the perfect person today to talk about all of the things I wanted to talk about. So,
Well, I hope
Habib,
so.
yeah. So Habib Fanny is um, he is an author. He is a physician. I'll just read out the description here. The subtitle of your book is, quote, "A journey from Ivory Coast to America, from African to Black, and from undocumented to doctor," which kind of says it all. So you are a U.S. physician. You grew up in the Ivory Coast in Africa. You are an American African. You're also an African American. You were raised Muslim. You're now an atheist. You're an outsider. You're an insider. It's just so another thing about Habib is that he is a very active writer on Quora, where he answers questions. He's got over 100,000 followers now. Well, I think
We're getting
looking at
close to it
different.
anyway. Yeah.
No, but you have like a book. Your book recommendations account has like over 100,000. It's so
Oh,
there's,
cool.
yeah, there's several different accounts that you have on there, but people really, really want to know what you have to say, and I think for good reason, because you have very fascinating and interesting perspectives on just a wide variety of issues. And you are known for using a lot of evidence, a lot of charts, a lot of data, really doing your
Yeah.
research, whatever you're talking about, which is what I really like. And one of the things is that when I read the stuff you say, I almost feel like, I'm like, wow, this is exactly what I think, but he just wrote it so much better than I did. He just articulated better. So I was thinking this 2020 has been a crazy year. We've had this coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. You have, you are on the front line. I mean, you're a physiatrist, but you're in the industry, in the healthcare industry as a physician, as a specialist. We have all the Black Lives Matter protests, which as of now, I think I read today, have now become
The largest, right? Ever.
largest ever, the largest protest movement in the history of the United States. And we have an election coming up. And I know that you are kind of a U.S. politics junkie like I am. So
Yeah.
I want to talk about that as well. And I thought, just when it comes to all three of these things,
Awesome.
yeah, it's great. And so I'm going to mention two more things and then I'll shut up.
Okay.
I know I'm talking a lot. You are the author of an excellent book called "The Gazelle Ate My Homework," right? The
Thank
subtitle
you.
is again, I read it out in the beginning. It's kind of a memoir and a also just a distillation of your views on different kinds of things. It's actually really, really funny, and also there are parts of it that are very serious. There are parts of it that are very emotionally moving, but there's an element of humor in it that I think is very characteristic of the way that you write. So you have that book out. The second thing I want to tell everybody is that you are on call.
That is
So,
true.
so at any time in this, during this stream, you may have to go. Hopefully you won't.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. So I don't know how it works in physiatry, but in pathology, it was kind of, there were calls that were very, very quiet most of the time, but occasionally you'd
Did,
have
did you
to.
just call when somebody was dead and then he's not dead anymore? Like, oh
So what we had was, so we were on call pretty much, I think, one weekend a week, which is luxurious if
oh my
if you
God,
know anything
yeah,
about medical
yeah.
residency. Sorry, one weekend a
A
month.
month, yes, I figured you meant. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
and we get called in if there was an autopsy. So if the autopsy was ordered before 2 p.m., and we'd have to go in and do it right then and there. If it was after 2 p.m., it'd be delayed till the next day because the guy's not going to get any deader,
Yeah, not
or the
usually.
woman. I don't want to be. I want to be inclusive, non-binary, whatever.
Yeah.
And then The other thing we got called in for at strange times, which I don't think it didn't happen very often where I was doing residency, is frozen sections for transplants. So, they found a matching organ,
Okay.
flew in on a helicopter, and we have to go in and do our pathological studies on it before it's transplanted. So that would be sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning. But aside from that, yeah, it was pretty chill. What do you guys get called in for?
Okay, so I'm an inpatient physiatrist, right? So a lot of my job looks like I'm an internist, right? I'm managing diabetes and blood pressure for the most part, right? On a day-to-day basis. And then there's some PM&R specific issues, like if somebody has a spinal cord injury, sometimes they have this autonomic dysfunction where they might get bradycardic and their heart rate shoots way up, and it's because they're getting some kind of mismatch between the sympathetic and parasympathetic, and you gotta usually it's because they're having some urinary retention or some fecal retention, or there something is happening that's putting them ill at ease, and their body's just responding by freaking everybody else out, right? But
this is for a general audience. I think they understood fecal retention. Just considering the political situation in the U.S. right now, everybody the rest of it may have gone over their heads, but still,
But it's anyway. Usually, what happens is I got this thing here, and they're very courteous. They're like, text me first. They'll be like, hey, patient in room such and such is having such and such, and I'm like, okay, is this an emergency? Probably not. But and then I'll like text something back. But the good news is I never have to go in, right? It's basically, if it's really bad, it's like, all right, let's call the internist who's in the building, and let's go evaluate the patient real quick and like see if we need to ship him out. Otherwise, it's like, what do I want to order for this or this thing? It's like it's not super heavy, but you can travel.
It does happen.
It happens.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Anyway, so you are, I think, you're on the West Coast, right? You're in Oregon, and how is the situation there? I mean, with COVID, it looks like there is pretty much like a clusterfuck happening right now. Like, you have states where everything's spiking, and Florida is actually recording sort of record highs, 10,000, 11,000 cases a day. The highest ever reported for them. They're kind of rising up the charts of the states. Europe has opened up travel from other places, but the US, unfortunately, or I don't know, fortunately for them, I guess, is not on the list. Are you seeing anything? Have you seen anything? How is it in Oregon?
Well, I think what you're trying to say is that we are winning Corona. Okay, we are winning so much, we're even getting tired of winning. I'm hoping that we stop winning soon enough. But what's happening is, to be fair, it's not only happening in red states that didn't take it seriously. We're having spikes in California as well. Presumably, they took it a lot more seriously than most other places. In Oregon, it's very interesting. In the Portland, so Oregon has about 4.2 million people, and I just learned this because I'm a new resident of Oregon, right? I gotta know where I just moved. The Portland metro area, and Portland is the biggest city in Oregon, has about 2.5 million people. Okay, and that's where most of the spikes are. I mean, you see some other counties where you're getting increased numbers as well, but mostly it's there, and it's not that far from where I live. It's like a 90-minute drive.
Right.
But it feels like a world away in terms of how it impacts me at work. Again, all I have to do when I go in every day is I have to get my temperature taken, and they'll ask you, like, have you had any fevers, cough, and whatever else? And then you go, no, I haven't. And then they record the temperature, and then you have to mask, right? Now the new directive is the patients, when they leave their rooms, also have to wear a mask. And that's pretty much about it. Restaurants are closed. Some of them started opening about 6 weeks ago or so, and now we're getting directives that this might not have been the best idea in the world. Everywhere you go now, you're supposed to wear a mask inside a building. So Oregon is, our numbers are rising, but we're not one of the craziest places right now.
Right.
And from a healthcare perspective, the way it affects me the most is it can delay admissions to inpatient rehab, especially if someone is coming from a different facility. We require that somebody be COVID tested and negative, before they arrive, and sometimes that will delay things. But again, whenever I talked about this thing, I almost feel guilty about how little it's impacting me and my practice and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, it's not perfect, but like maybe
No, I think you're okay. You're okay. It's probably a good situation. Like right now, we want to see it go down. But what do you think? Like how? So just, I mean, I have my own views on this. Seeing what happened. I'm up in Canada, and we're now reopening things. I mean, I was on a cottage trip for the last 4 days. We did finally go to a beach. Still, everybody's physically distancing. And my view on this is that obviously there's a lot of causes for this. You can talk about what China did in the beginning. You can talk about how the US handled it, how there's many different things you can say. But for me, in Canada, we have, I live in Ontario, and Ontario has a premier, is basically like the equivalent of the governor, who is a hard conservative who I barely ever agreed with on anything. Like, I did not like him, but he has done a phenomenal job when it comes to COVID. And most of the liberals and people who didn't vote for him will tell you the same thing. He and the super liberal prime minister we have, Justin Trudeau, they had a unified message. When we came in, they chucked politics aside. There was no bickering. They both listened to our health experts and health ministers. And they came up with not just a goal of what they wanted to do, not just their own assessments of what's going on, but they came up with a unified message about how they were going to take care of things. It worked really well. That we could see it in place. People listened to it because there was credibility to it. I mean, both these people, like, they're political enemies, but they're coming together, along with most of the other premiers in the country. And they just handled it really well. So when they tell us, can you hear me now?
No, I can't. Okay.
I can't hear you.
What? I heard.
What is happening with StreamYard today? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you perfectly.
Sorry, everybody. Okay, my mic is working.
I can hear you.
Headphones working.
I can hear. Can you hear me?
Hold on. Let me unplug my earphones and plug them in again. Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly the entire time.
Oh, man. Hi. Can you say something?
Hello. Greetings.
I can't hear you. Okay, so do you think you could can you come back in again with the link?
Sure, let's try that again.
Sorry, audience people who are listening, just a little bit of patience if you can hear me. Can you guys hear me, by the way? Can someone respond and tell me if you guys can hear me, my voice at least? Great.
Here I am.
There we go.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you, and thank God. One atheist to another, thank God.
Thank God, but dude, having lived in Tennessee, I don't know if it's Tennessee that did it to me, but I think about a year ago, 2 years ago, I picked up "thank God" as one of my key expressions, and then I went to live in Tennessee, and I added "Dear God" and "Dear Lord" to the mix, right? So yeah, man. So amen to that.
Yeah, guys, thank you. I'm hearing. Okay, so Mars is telling us that audio is okay. Gisela, Hamad, Marla, thank you so much, and thank you for your patience with this. Sorry about this. We're having some sort of like StreamYard issues for some reason. I hope it doesn't happen again, but fingers crossed. But yeah, I was saying that, just in terms of political leadership and just and people chucking it aside and coming together. Now, when my government now tells me that it's okay, you can start sending your kids to daycare, and start going back to work. then yeah, I feel a little. I'm still cautious,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like I can trust them. But if I was living in
Yeah.
Georgia or Florida, and the governor said, "Yeah, go to the beaches, send your kids to daycare," I'd be like,
Yeah. No way.
no.
No way.
Um,
Um,
so I,
yeah.
so
Here.
yeah, I guess I'm wondering what your thoughts are
Yeah. I
on how
think
this happened.
it's really important to depoliticize these things as much as you possibly can, right? I think to me what's emblematic of what happens when you politicize something is global warming, right? That's like the worst possible case scenario, right? You take an issue that shouldn't be an issue, you politicize it, and all of a sudden people become closed-minded, like they can't hear evidence anymore, right? And something kind of similar, maybe not to the same degree, but happened with this Corona thing.
Right.
I think part of the reason why there was no full politicization of it is because a lot of the conservatives in the country are older people who are more susceptible to this. So, their politics may have been pulling them differently in a different direction from their rational self-interest. So there was a little bit of mitigation from that standpoint. But if you have a leader or several leaders who are trying to downplay the crisis and minimize it every step of the way, and who are really not doing anything in terms of trying to ensure that there's any kind of national response, it's very hard to mobilize the population in the way that you need to. And this is one of those things where you need to have a lot of people who are willing to make sacrifices over a prolonged period of time for an issue that they can't see with their own eyes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So whenever you have something like that, that's why I brought up global warming as well. It's not like the planet isn't warming in front of you. Like, maybe you notice it over a few years or decades, most likely. You're like, oh, there's not as much snow as there used to be when I was a kid. But even then, it's not quite the same. But it's similar to this in that it's an intangible, and you're asking people to make sacrifices now to prevent something really bad from happening later. And if you don't have a consensus in your government figures, there's a high chance that people are going to fracture along the usual fault lines. And that was kind of unfortunate. The other thing too is there is kind of a secular religion of freedom worshiping in the US, and people have this very expensive definition of freedom, and it's freedom defined almost in opposition. There's like this pride. I'm going to proudly defy whatever the government is telling me because, yay, freedom.
Yeah, it's like a fetishization of libertarianism, right? It's a libertarian fetish.
Yep.
Or when you talk to most like serious libertarians, not just the people who actually know about it, they'll tell you that has nothing to do with what they think. But it's that people won't wear masks. Like, you can't make me wear a mask. It's my body and my body, my choice.
My choice. It's really interesting, right?
But with seatbelts, the government does tell you have to wear seatbelts, and you comply.
And you do.
There's no protest about that.
Again, it's just politicization, because again, you have some data that came out to show that the people who got their news from conservative news sources became very skeptical of this, right? And I think it was kind of unfortunate. Now, I did support trying to see how things would shake out about 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, when they said, let's try to reopen some places. I'm like, this is probably a bad idea because we don't have any vaccine. We don't have anything different, really, right? We've just bought ourselves a little reprieve that we didn't really use to do anything. But sure, let's give it a try and see how it goes. Let's keep measuring things. Unfortunately, we've fallen short on, making sure that we have the best, contact tracing and testing available. But it's encouraging to see that people have the capacity to say, you know what, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe we should dial down some of this openness, and maybe we should actually go back to shutting some places down. So I'm hoping that this time people are actually buying it, but, human nature being what it is, and the American culture being what it is, I wouldn't be surprised if we keep doing this yo-yo thing where we reopen, we think, see, the numbers are falling, we're fine. Let's, we close things, the numbers start falling, and people decide that their freedom is more important than anything else. Again, we reopen stuff, and then you get big spikes. It's going to be a challenge,
It's hard to also, I actually sympathize with the people who are perceiving this as an overreaction, because first of all, it is with a pandemic, you want to plan an overreaction.
Yeah.
You don't want to just react proportionally, because you don't know what you're reacting to. So what you want to do is you want to go absolutely all out and overreact. It's because it's easier to explain that later on than underreact. So, but at the same time, this idea of how individuals can come together and do something that would benefit the collective, is a hard thing for people to understand, because if you're in a place that doesn't really have this, like, nobody else has it, I don't know anybody, it's not in my area.
Yeah, exactly.
For the average person, it's really hard to comprehend. It's like saying, what do I need to go and vote for?
Exactly.
Everybody, what if I don't vote? What difference? How much of a difference is one vote going to make?
Yeah.
And it's a really hard thing to sort of communicate for people to grasp. As you're saying, it's a kind of intangible.
Yeah. Like I said, it's like global warming in that way, right? It's like, it's just my one card. Leave me alone. I'm just flying here. Leave me alone. I'm just littering a little bit. It's fine.
There was also confusion, I think, about the masks, because the whole time in the beginning they were saying no, you don't have to wear a mask. Don't. They were telling you
don't do it because you're going to take it from healthcare workers, right?
Which was true, right? But they gave the impression that don't do it because you're going to take it from healthcare workers to stay at home, and it won't really protect you much anyway. So there was that caused a lot of problems as well. I think the way that this was in the beginning. So there may have been. Anyway, I think that. How do you think? We've got so many confounding factors. We've got this. How do you think it's going to play out in terms of the election coming up?
Man, so the election thing is very interesting, right? Because when this started, if you're not talking about this as a pandemic response, but you're talking about it as a political response, it wasn't really clear whether people were going to be more against restrictions than for restrictions. And what Donald Trump decided to do is that he was going to go all in on downplaying things and supporting people who wanted to stop the restrictions. Now that we have some data on how it's shaken out, it turned out that about 2/3 of the population, or 60%, is like, what? Yeah, let's just be more careful and sacrifice the economy, at the altar of public health. Whereas only about 1/3 of the population was wanting to do the reverse, right? And so that has led to lower poll numbers for Trump. I don't want to overstate the case, because if you look at the 538 average, he was like around 43%, at his peak. Actually, he peaked like 45% relatively recently in the very beginning of the crisis, because there was kind of a rally to the flag effect. Yeah. And then now he's down to like 40%, right? And if the election were held today, he would get absolutely destroyed. The question is, are things going to change between now and November? We have 4 months to go, right? You still would rather be Biden than Trump today, but it's also not over. One thing that I do think people are making, especially on the conservative side, one mistake they're making is that they're tending to say, see, the polls are wrong last time. Therefore, what are you guys talking about?
See the what?
The polls were wrong last time.
Yeah.
Right, in 2016, and liberals are getting cocky and overconfident, and therefore, Trump is going to win again. What they forget,
there's a PTSD kind of thing associated with it. They're so triggered by that they're thinking, well, the polls are wrong then, and we just don't want to go through the shock again like we did.
Yeah. Which is good, right? Because I even have a little bit of that way. I have to restrain my enthusiasm, right? But again, if you're looking at an environment where Biden really is ahead by 9 percentage points nationally, that puts places into play that Democrats have no business winning, like Texas, And I'm not saying
Arizona's a swing state.
Yeah,
a swing state.
Georgia is a swing state, right?
Well,
this year,
Florida, he's leading.
Yeah, he's leading convincingly, right? Ohio is back into play. It's the only question is, I think what could save Trump would be, one, the moving the conversation away from race issues to something else, right? let's say that we have a strong economic recovery for whatever reason, right? Right now, people have been going back to work. If you look at the latest economic data, there's been a shedding of permanent jobs, but the people who were furloughed temporarily, a lot of them have gotten their jobs back. If you see a pattern like that, you could see kind of, because his biggest strength, if you look at the polls, is that people are giving him his highest rating on the economy for whatever reason. But that's neither here nor there. I disagree, but that's not, I'm not the whole electorate. But about 50 or a little bit more than that, people give him good grades on the economy. And so if that continues to improve, the focus of the talk could be, hey, let's talk about the election, right? Or if the topic of the conversation changes from, wow, Trump shouldn't be president, to, oh, look at Joe Biden, how he's made a gaffe. He said something else that was silly or something like that. Then that could, play to the advantage of Trump. But as it is, unless there's like a really huge change in the conversation, it's very hard to see how he comes back from a 9-point deficit.
He's especially states, because a lot of times these, and this whole idea about the polls being wrong in 2016, they were and they were not. If you look at the polls, the national percentage where it showed that Hillary Clinton was leading by a little bit, the result bore that out. That was right. She got 3 million more votes. So, but that's not what matters. What matters is the Electoral College. So there were changes. There were sort of minor vote differences in the Rust Belt states that turned the election for him, and places like that. So, and when you say, I think there was somebody who gave this example online somewhere that I read that, 4 years ago, the meteorologist said,
I was about to say the same thing.
That it was there's a 20% chance of rain. No, there's an 80% chance of rain, but
it didn't rain.
It rain. It was so therefore, all meteorologists are wrong.
I'm wrong, and we should just
And you are, but if you've only had 44 to 45 presidents. And that's a small sample size.
Exactly. Very small sample size, right? So stuff happens. But I think
are part of the thing.
I think a lot of Republicans have really learned the wrong lesson from 2016. What they learned is that liberalism is obviously wrong, and the country was repudiating liberalism by electing Donald Trump, who is the antithesis of everything liberals stand for. That's one way of seeing it. It's not entirely false, but it was also the narrowest possible margin of victory, and it was a fluke, right? Nobody wins the Electoral College by losing the popular vote on purpose. Like whenever that happens, it's like, oh wow, you got lucky, right? Like that this other rule saved your ass. Not like, hey, you were such a brilliant strategist, you knew you were going to lose the popular vote on purpose, and it was like you're planning this, like this battle of Austerlitz, right, where you just let your troops be like bait for the opposition, but meanwhile you were enveloping them or something. It's like, no, that's not what he did. He just he didn't even know he was going to win, right? He thought he was going to lose, and then he just had a fluke victory. But then you're treating it as him being this mastermind, which he's obviously not, right? So I'm liking Democrats' changes right now. Again, things could change, but assuming that they don't change too much, this is a pretty solid lead for Biden. And it's not even because Biden is doing anything special. He's just basically staying out of the way. And Trump.
As long as Biden speaks as little as possible and Trump speaks as much as possible. That's basically the dynamic you want to maintain. And you can just be a spectator. But okay, so let's just do this, because one of the biggest things that you hear is, and I know that the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, come into this in a big way as well. And so we're going to talk about that, how that relates to it too. But just to start with, people say, well, in 2016, this is why Trump won. This is why Trump won. What are, say that, and I'll tell you what I think mine are too. But what are, if you could say, the top 3 reasons that you think that Trump won in 2016?
Okay, so number 1, by far, is that Hillary Clinton was a very unpopular candidate by historical standards, right? So you had 2 candidates, the one with the most negative ratings ever in the history of polling, which is Trump, running against the second most unpopular person in the history of modern polling. And so you had a lot of people who just discussed it, right? I think people on the liberal side underestimated the degree of antipathy a lot of the electorate had towards Hillary Clinton, right?
Mhm.
It was just like, oh, this is just Republican propaganda, yada, yada, blah, 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 it's fine. But it was not, right? So, but whether that was fair or not, it was not. A second factor was just the seesawing of election. When you have a party in power for 8 years, the electorate of that party becomes complacent to some extent. I think what political power does is that it puts you into place, but it doesn't give you all the tools to do everything you wanted to do on your list, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the most idealistic members of your coalition have a tendency to become disillusioned and think, oh, we put this guy in power, he didn't do all the stuff that we wanted him to do, they're all the same, whatever, I'm going to skip the election, I'm going to stay home and play video games or something, right? I'm just like dissing on video game players, but I play video games myself every night. So no offense to anybody out there who plays video games, right? Whereas on the other side, every single little thing that you do becomes like, one thing on a catalog of injuries that people are jotting down, like, oh my God, I can't believe he just did this. Oh my God, who did he nominate again? Oh my God. So the other side is getting more and more pumped about going to vote. And so if you have Democrats who are getting kind of like apathetic, and you have Republicans who are more encouraged, right? You get another scenario where the turnout may favor the side that's been out of power for 8 years. So that's number two. And then number three, I have a hard time picking any one thing. I don't think it's necessarily the top three, but there is a growing segment of the population in many countries in the West who don't feel as invested in the status quo as many of us who have degrees and jobs feel, right? Mm-hmm. You have these people who are kind of alienated from the system. You had the 2008 financial crisis, for instance, and there's a lot of people who had never recovered from that, right? And then after that, instead of actual stable jobs coming back, you get like the gig economy. And you have a lot of people who, on one hand, are feeling apathetic and they think no matter what I do, nothing is going to work. So that doesn't, they don't want to vote. And on the other hand, the people who do, a subsegment of that wants changes, but really radical changes to the system, right? And if you're not on board with, let's say, Bernieism, then you're basically just as bad as the other side. So screw it, I'm going to vote for Jill Stein, right? There was a little bit of that also going on in the system. So maybe not the biggest factor, but there's so many factors that like added up, right? And he told me three, but whatever. I'm going to fight one more thing, which is James,
go for it.
James freaking Comey, right? Like Ted, right before the bell, doing an assist for Donald Trump. And because in spite of everything else that I've cited, right? If there had been no change in the trajectory of the election by 10 days before the vote, and James Comey hadn't come back and say, hey, guess what? We're reopening the investigation. We don't have any new data, but I just want to let you know, in case you were wondering, that we're reopening this stuff for whatever reason, then Hillary would have won because she was on target to win, not by much, but she was like 10 days before the election. I think she was like 8 points ahead or something, or 6 points ahead or something like that. And then right after that, you saw a dip for her. And then the people who decided how to vote in the last week of the election decisively broke for Trump, right? I think that put him over the top. So,
No, I agree with, I agree with pretty much all of that. I think that one of the top two reasons, I guess it would be a tie for number one, would be that people just assumed that Hillary was going to win.
Yep.
And they also were not excited about her.
Yep.
So they thought that they were in a post-racial world. The U.S. elected a black president. He was reelected then.
Yeah.
I mean, that's insane. And his middle name was Hussein. And, we've kind of moved beyond this. All of this is over. All of these people sort of screaming, lock her up and, all this, build the wall and everything. This is just a sort of a fringe reaction to this. It's never going to get anywhere. The polls show that, okay, there's a 75% chance she's going to win. And we don't really like her that much.
So somebody else is going to vote for her, right?
I don't really love her. I'm not feeling enthused about going out and voting. Yeah. And she's going to win anyway. And we've already become a different nation. The transformation has happened. So we're not going to go in. And then they just stayed home. I mean, I think Chris Cuomo, the CNN anchor, who's anyway, that's a whole podcast episode for later. But this guy, so he said that black people kind of helped when he talks about the black demographic. He's like, they helped Trump win by not coming out and voting.
Yeah, that's
right.
True.
In a sense that, and it wasn't just black people. There's a lot of people, a lot of Democrats that stayed home because they weren't excited about it. So that's one thing. I mean, they, as you said, that they weren't excited about her and they didn't really like her much. At the same time, they were very complacent about the
very much so.
Yeah, I think that was really the main reason that he won. And the other thing, I do agree with you in terms of the people who didn't get off the economic reasons. People just want to kind of burn down the system and start over. For a lot of reasons, because of the people who didn't get over the 2008 crash and these sort of, you can have a very vocal and very enthusiastic minority come up and beat a complacent sort of majority often. But it's very different. Everything that you're pointing out, that's the thing. People think, okay, this happened in 2016. It'll happen in 2020 again, as if nothing has changed from 2016.
Right now, nothing. Liberals are enraged and very enthusiastic about voting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Like they in 2016, the other thing is the leftism was kind of on the rise. Jeremy Corbyn was going way up there in Britain, and it was a really big thing. Bernie became a phenomenon. I remember watching Bernie 10, 15 years ago, and he used to be on Bill Maher, and I was like, this guy's amazing. He's great, but of course he's never going to win. He's never going to win, but we love Bernie, and suddenly this guy is socialism is becoming a phenomenon. That's just not the way it is right now. On the other hand, Biden is actually very well liked. Like people,
but about Biden, that people are underestimating just how solidly to the left of Obama he's running, right? So one of the things that really struck me this year is about the moderates, the so-called moderates of this year in the Democratic Party were all starting well to the left of where Obama finished, right? And I think this is a testament to, maybe it's Bernie Sanders, maybe it's the progressive forces pulling the party to the left, or maybe it's just a changing time to a combination of the above.
I think it was Bernie. Like in 2016, he changed the party.
And I think even he was surprised by how much demand for change there was, right? Because before it was, we'll do an Obama. We'll go tap into the energy and enthusiasm of the liberal crowd. But then when we govern, we're going to do the adult thing, right? We want to do the adult thing because, those things are not adult things, right? The adult thing is you're serious and you just listen to the Chamber of Commerce because they're very serious, right? And you kind of like take all the liberal proposal and just like water them down. And then you go negotiate with the Republicans and you water them down. And you're like, hey, see, we got a great compromise that everybody in the Senate can agree on, right? And the people on the left end of the Democratic Party decided, screw this stuff. Let's not negotiate with ourselves and water down the thing. Let's just push for the maximalist thing we can get. Now, that has its own electoral perils, but whatever. Let's push for that, see how far left we can push the debate. And it's been really remarkable because it used to be that a $15 minimum wage was like a really fringe idea. Now it's like completely mainstream. Lots of things, Medicare for all, there's just a lot of those things, right?
Habib, in 2009, when they were doing Obamacare, Obama had 60 senators. And he had a majority in the House. So he could have, it was filibuster proof, right? He could have, and he had to get rid of the public option.
I know.
He could not get a majority of Democrats.
I know.
Filibuster-proof majority of Democrats, and this is just for like all the Bernie people, just to understand the perspective. We couldn't get them on board with a public option because it's something their constituents wouldn't agree with. So he had to get rid of it and make it a fully privatized sort of universal healthcare system with the individual mandate and everything. So he got that through, and the way he got it through was there's another part of it that. While so 60 votes, it gets in the Senate, it gets passed down to the House, and that happens. Ted Kennedy's died, so he's replaced surprisingly as a surprise
By
by
a Republican.
a Republican senator. So
Yeah.
now it's 59. So if the House makes changes to the Obamacare bill and sends it back to the Senate,
Yep.
it's gonna get filibustered. So
Yep.
talks to the House is like, okay, listen, just pass it the way it is.
Yeah.
And the additional things you want to do, you can do through a process called budget reconciliation.
Yeah.
They had a sort of an ancillary separate thing that they brought in. That's how they got. So because the public option was too far left an idea.
I know.
Now the public option
It's
is
the
too
most-
conservative.
Yeah. It's the right. It's the furthest. It's the most conservative thing you can adopt.
Right.
As the starting point in a Democratic primary. Right.
Yeah.
In just a span of 10 years. So for me, and again, I'm really happy about this development, right? Because I can live with all those proposals, right? I always mention how in the Netherlands they cover everybody with an all-private system. Is it perfect? No, right? Do some people complain? Yes, but it's universal, and we don't have that. So for me, the mechanism by which we achieve universal coverage is very negotiable. But I am just happy to see that now all the Democratic Party is on board, right? Like you could basically get a public option passed today, even with Joe Manchin, in the Senate.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know, man. I'll take it. I'll take it.
Yeah, it's and we can talk about what the best healthcare options. Maybe we can have another conversation about this at some point because you're obviously the healthcare industry, so am I, and so we could talk about in Canada we have single payer. You guys have fully privatized sort of universal healthcare, and as you said. In different countries, the highest ranked systems are, for instance, in France, where they have a public-private hybrid, which I actually think works best.
Yeah, all these things, to me, like all these things work. Again, if you ask me to design one from scratch, I'll say like a very generous, like single-payer system that covers most things, and then a private system on top of it for people who want supplemental healthcare, right?
Yeah,
everybody can live with it. It's fine. But in the U.S., you got to pass things through the funnel of the U.S. Senate, and by God, it is hard to get things through there.
It is, yeah. So it was actually I don't think people realize how difficult it was to get done, and how and that's a question. And I think we talked about this last time too. That I always see people talking about ideas like, "What's your idea?" Well, I got Medicare for all. I want to improve on Obamacare. I want to do this. But what they should really be asking is, okay. Whatever your idea is, how are you going to get it through?
How are you going to get it through?
If you're president, you are basically the CEO of a company where half of your the board or whatever the speak is, hates you.
Yep.
Okay. And will try to stop everything that you're doing, but you need all of them to be on board. Yeah. So what are you going to do? Or you need at least some of them.
It's going to be, if you ask me what Democrats should do, they should push healthcare back a couple of steps. Number one, abolish this filibuster. Number two, bring DC and Puerto Rico in as states, like immediately, like the day after, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you abolish the filibuster, you get the situation where there's more red states than blue ones. And at any given time, there's a higher likelihood of Democrats, right? So if you're going to abolish the filibuster, you need to immediately bring in 2 more states to kind of equalize the balance.
2 more states, and that's 2 more senators per state, right?
Yeah, that's 4, right? That way you show up your flank, and you also don't depend on Joe Manchin to pass your shit, right? Yeah. Because right now, if you have a bare majority, it's whatever Joe Manchin wants that gets passed, right? All these fancy plans, it really doesn't matter. As long as he says no, you're dead. But if you have like 2 people from Puerto Rico, 2 people from DC, then you have a lot more room, a lot more wiggle room to pass stuff, and also a lot less backlash that you're gonna get. Because even if you go lose the next race in like Nebraska or whatever, nobody cares, right? Like you got 4 seats, your baseline is higher by 4 seats, right? I think that's kind of the kind of thing they should think about, honestly, because and once you got it in place, then you can be bolder and pass whatever you want. Because first of all, you have more room you have more wiggle room, and you're not fearing that backlash. Like the 2010 backlash that we saw after Obamacare was passed, for instance, right? Yeah. So that's where I would go with that.
I think, so that'll be kind of interesting. Hopefully they win, but it does look like, it does really seem like it would. I'm not sure. Again, with Hillary, you had the emails that came in, but
Biden is a known quantity, right?
That's the thing. Everything, he's got so much crap in his past, and it's all known.
And the other thing too is there's a lot of us on the left who at this point are basically reacting the same way the right reacted last time, where they're like, I don't care. I don't care. Whatever comes out, I just need to get Trump out of there.
Yeah,
Right? Like
yeah.
I don't care if he's into dogfighting. Like I mean I care, but like I am going to vote for him. Right?
Let's
I
say
don't care
I want to see the Joe Biden dogfighting memes
yeah,
pop
yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. It's like I don't care if he's ever punched a beggar in the face. Like I just need to get Trump out of there, and we'll just get a better Democrat in office next time. But like we can't lose this next election.
Yeah, I know. It's really there is this thing about people saying, well, there's a lot of Trump enthusiasm, pro-Trump enthusiasm,
Yeah, that's true.
and there isn't as much pro-Biden enthusiasm,
It doesn't
which
matter.
yeah, that's the thing, because there is a lot more anti-Trump
Yeah,
enthusiasm, and
yeah,
Biden's riding that wave. And
yep,
honestly, my toddler's diaper could ride that wave.
yeah.
That could be the
Basically,
alternative, and it would win. It's
yeah.
a really strange. It's a interesting time. Now, just moving on to, and I guess we're going to stay on this, but
Hold on, I got a text from work here, real quick.
okay.
Uh,
So I'll tell the audience again while you're looking at it that
yeah.
we got Habib on a time when he is on call at the eve of July 4th. Habib is on call. So we had this possibility of him getting potentially called in, or maybe he gets something he can take care of. So in case that happens, we just we would potentially stop this podcast and then record the rest of it and put it all up.
Yeah. They're requesting that I call them. They have a patient who fell.
Mhm.
I hope it's not going to be too long, but
Okay,
let me.
go for it, and I can talk to some of the people.
All right, I'll be right back.
Sure. So, guys, so again, Habib is on call, so he's just going to make a call back to the hospital. So while he's away, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, let's do it. So Anwar Coker is asking, so it's Trump versus anti-Trump. And yeah, I think it is. I mean, I think it's just a situation where people just want him out. They'll vote for anything that will get rid of him. Right? The good thing about Biden is a known entity. It's somebody where all of the good things about him, the reason that people like him, and he's very popular. He's a lot popular than Hillary was, which is a big defining factor. So that's one thing. He's more popular. The other thing is that he's basically riding an anti-Trump enthusiasm wave. I mean, Trump, when he got elected, it was a very different time. Now it's a very different time. The pandemic has really, really hurt Trump with people. It has especially hurt him with the senior population. Senior population, he could always kind of be depended on, and they really, really came out for him in 2016. In 2020, it doesn't seem like it's going to be like that, because if you look at polls with seniors in swing states right now, in the battleground states, it seems a lot of them are actually breaking for Biden. So Biden's kind of peeling them off of the Trump base. So that's a really big factor. You see all of this also in Florida. The second thing is the Black Lives Matter protests, which, as of today, it turns out they are. I mean, I read this today. I don't know how true it is, but they are now the largest protest movement in the history of the United States.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah. Looks like. Are you back? You got to go.
I am back.
Yeah.
The perils of being a doctor.
Yeah. It's a terrible life. Terrible.
Right.
I know. So I was just talking about Black Lives Matter, like this movement that has now, because we were talking about the two things that are sort of going to harm Trump the most, and one is the pandemic response, and the second thing is, so what's really interesting about the Black Lives Matter movement is not only has this become now the largest protest in U.S. history, but this has about, the protests in general have the support of 74% of Americans, and this is the thing that's stunning, 53% of Republicans.
I know.
So a majority of Republicans have been supporting these, and a majority of Republicans are accepting that there is an element of systemic racism
I know.
and basically in the criminal justice system in the U.S.
Yeah.
And the sort of Republican-leaning corporations even
I
have
know.
seen this. You know, the Republicans, they turned on a dime when it came to same-sex marriage. Once they found out that it was like over,
I know.
they're like, okay, hey, we're all for same-sex marriage now. We're not going to
Yeah.
challenge the Supreme Court. Nothing. So now they've seen, okay, you know, the majority of Republicans are supporting this, and a lot of them are, you know, the NFL came out and apologized. Apparently, they're going to play the African American national anthem now before some of the games. NASCAR banned Confederate flags.
I saw that. Yeah.
There are amazing things that are happening.
Yeah. There are places voting to take down the Confederate statues. There's places voting down to take down problematic statues, right?
Well, the statues are one thing, but Mississippi is
I
the
know.
last state
I
that
know.
has the Confederate flag as part of its state flag.
Yeah.
And they have voted by a large majority, margin, to remove that and to change their flag.
And when it happened, I told my dad I didn't think I would live to see that one. Like, I thought it would happen someday, but like I thought it would be like in the 22nd century or something. You know, I just didn't see that one coming. Yeah. But I'm like, wow. Yeah. So yeah, it's been very interesting. It's been very, very interesting.
It's one thing that's really interesting about the U.S. is that when these dominoes start falling, it happens really fast. I mean, you went from even most Democrats opposing. I mean, in 2008, when Hillary and Obama were doing their primaries, and they both opposed same-sex marriage in 2008.
I know. Obama's like, later, I'm evolving. People are like, okay.
Evolving, and then he went to evolving, and then 5 years later, most Republicans, turns out, are okay with it, and next thing you know, or no, the country was overall supporting it, so they just came out, and Joe Biden actually did that slip up, right?
Right, that's the thing. It's like it was a very interesting mistake. It was like, well, it's out in the open, I guess we support it, but then nobody also was shocked because they're like, dude, you are not really against gay marriage. Get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like, Obama, just shut up. You're not against gay marriage. You're just waiting for a propitious moment to come in and say, yeah, let's support this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is. So how do you know, let's kind of talk about this. I mean, we've seen, we saw the pandemic happen. We saw Trump's response to the pandemic. Now we're seeing the Black Lives Matter protests.
Yeah.
Recently, he called and he said something about them. He said there are, what did he say about Black Lives Matter?
Trump?
The face of, I don't know, something that's a violent entity. Or he had some quote recently that he said that was negative towards them. It was just a couple of days after he retweeted that white power.
Yeah. So. I mean, part of me was, I'm like, okay, at least it's out in the open, right? Like, just don't like beat around the bush and do this plausible deniability thing. Just, all right, white power. Okay, good. At least we know what you stand for.
Yeah, he called it a symbol of hate. The largest protest movement in U.S. history, a symbol of hate.
Yeah.
Okay. This is 2 days ago.
Yeah, and the thing is, a few years ago, this stuff still worked, right? That's the reason why he's a one-trick pony, right? He had this thing that really shouldn't have worked a few years ago, but it worked because of a fluke. And because it worked, that's the one move he'll go back to every time he's in political trouble. He'll try to stir up the racial waters again. Like, oh, let's see if we can, stoke the, flames of racial resentment or something. But he's doing it at the worst possible time because all he's doing is highlighting just how unfit for the current moment he is.
Yeah, it's I think it's beyond that. I don't think he's reading what's happening. I mean, he's the way the polls are. If they're showing really good, oh, these are great polls. If they don't, these are terrible. The polls don't count. Remember 2016. So there's he's able to play both sides of that. But it just doesn't seem like it's it's not strategic. So there was this theory that he plays 3D chess or 4D chess.
I've never bought it. Never, not for a day.
Yeah.
I think he's just like impulse driven,
he's impulse driven. I know that he does a little bit of planning. Like, it turned out that when he wants to distract from something, he knows how to play the
Yeah.
He knows how to, he can tweet something out and completely. I think when he was tweeted about what was this new John Bolton book, he said that when he tweeted defending the Khashoggi killing, the Saudi journalist, he did that at a time when it was revealed that Ivanka Trump was using her private email account for official business, which was the same thing that Hillary did. And then as soon as that happened, he supported that. And the media obviously took the bait, and they're like, "Oh, Trump's defending MBS," and because they had to. I mean, that's a big thing. They don't have much of a choice either. But Mars is saying Trump's trying to play to the culture war, but it doesn't seem to be doing him much good in the face of the economy.
And especially in the face of the fact that the national mood on race has changed and changed decisively, right?
Yeah.
Where more people are saying, yes, I support the protests, even in spite of the excesses, right? The excesses are not representative of the protest as a whole. There is still most people are peaceful protesters, and there is still a valid thing that is being protested. Whereas Trump is trying to appeal to the people who think, see, this is what happens when you let these people protest. It goes out of hand, and pretty soon your city is going to be burned to the ground, right? So let's go try to get that vote. The problem is those people, a lot of them have changed their mind. I think a lot of the edifice of systemic racism in policing wasn't built on malice. It was built on indifference and on skepticism, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a Black person talking about this stuff, oh, you guys always complain about race. Oh, you guys commit most of the crimes. Oh, you guys need to shut up. Oh, you guys need to go pick up a book and read it, whatever, right? And then even when I would talk and say, okay, I don't do crime, I don't do drugs, but like I feel racially profiled. I've been racially profiled. I've had the cops call on me. My friends who are doctors who are Black have had the cops call on them. Like this is a thing, right? But people were still skeptical. The George Floyd video was the moment where a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, this shit is real," right? Mm. Everybody, like millions and millions, watched this stuff or read reports of it and thought, "Oh my God, this shit was real. I don't want to live in a country where this is how policing is done." And so for those numbers to be what they are, a lot of people must have actually changed their minds decisively. So if you're trying to play the same, sort of plausible deniability racism that you were playing before, it's just not going to work, because a lot of people are like, no, actually, I think these people have a reason to protest. I would be out there protesting too if this was happening to me,
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. And how do you? I know that you grew up in the Ivory Coast, so this is just based on your experience. Your experience. So when you came from there to, I know in your book you talk about how you went up to Vancouver and you didn't really see that.
Yeah.
Nobody really paid attention to you, even though you're Black. You're like, okay, this is kind of weird. But so in the U.S., wherever you've been, you've lived all across the U.S. Yeah. You became a citizen, I think, several years ago. So you are, African American now.
I guess so.
But you grew up in Africa. When you first came here, there was some tension between you as somebody who came from Ivory Coast, an immigrant, and the Black Americans who were sort of had been here for
generations.
For generations. So how was your view of this, the just overall systemic racism? What was your perception of it about the US before, and how has it changed now, if it has?
I think the biggest thing is, and it's not just African immigrants, it is basically lots of immigrants who come to the US from poor countries look at Black Americans with no sympathy whatsoever. Whether those immigrants are from China, from the Caribbean, or from Russia, or whatever, it's like, guess what? I was poor in my country, or there's a lot of poverty in my country. I came here with nothing. I'm doing well. What the hell are you bitching about? Right? And it's a very implacable, I just don't have time for your BS right now because I got my own stuff to deal with and I got money to send back home and life is hard over there. So why don't you just shut up, go pick up a book, go study and get out of my face. I mean,
like slavery was over decades ago. So
right?
What are you complaining about now?
So shut up. We've heard this all before. Just go away. Okay. And I was very, I guess you might call pro-cop, because my assumption was the cops are not going to go mistreat you just because you're black. Shut up. This is not happening. This is like 1950. All right, we're in 2001. Shut up. Go away. You're making excuses for your own poor behavior, right? It's difficult to hold on to these ideas if you're black yourself.
Yeah.
And people look at you as a threat, and people call the cops on you. You're like, right? And then you have friends who have the same experiences, so you're not dreaming. Over time, it tends to change your opinions. Now, I think I'm still much more likely than my Black American friends to say, all right, even though we're supporting the protest, I'm going to go out there and make it a point to say, I do not support the looting, right? A lot of people will just say, let's take the party line. Let's not even focus about any of the bad stuff because this doesn't matter. It's a distraction. Let's just focus on the good thing that's happening right now and why we're doing this. And you are actually lending aid to the enemy by even mentioning this other stuff about the excesses, right? And for me, I'm like, for my own intellectual...
Is that something people do say, though? Is that what they say? That don't mention the looting because they're bringing attention to it?
I don't know that they say it, but I can read what other people write and how they talk about it. And it's immediately minimizing those things and saying, this is a distraction, just, like the looters are looters. They're going to do what looters do. These are protesters. And I'm like, okay, but it would help if there was some kind of policing, self-policing, I should say. I should be very careful about this word.
Yeah.
About how some of these things are done. Or it would help if we didn't willy-nilly condone people tearing down statues, for instance, right? Like I hate Confederate monuments. I wish it would go away, but I don't cry when one of them is torn down, right? But there is not a set of conventions that I know that clearly delineate between citizens having the right to tear down any monument they like, versus, let's say, pro-Confederate citizens having the right to tear down a Lincoln monument. Like, why is it that I have the right to do this if this is not, accepted right for everybody, right? I have a harder problem with that. So the way I would proceed is, let's have the relevant institution, the municipality or whatever, vote to take stuff down, right? I think I am more willing and more likely to speak that language, which almost sounds like a conservative language, than a lot of people who are born in the US. But overall, right, we're on the same page. We're happy the protests are happening. We're like, yep, this is what we've been talking about. Like, to me, the George Floyd death was horrendous, but it wasn't as shocking as it came to a lot of white Americans. We were like, yep, this is what we've been talking about, guys. And they're like, oh my God, can you believe this is happening? I'm like, yeah, I can totally believe it. This is what this is the same talk.
Yeah, this is about. I can't remember if it was Dave Chappelle who said it but no, I don't think it was Dave. It was somebody else. But like the idea was that that when the Rodney King beating happened, I think probably the same thing applies to George Floyd, is that when people saw it, they were just completely shocked. But when a lot of black people saw it, they're like, oh, okay, well, at least it's a good thing they got one of those on tape.
Yeah, that's the feeling, right?
Yeah.
Because you hear, again, it's all anecdotal evidence, right? But you hear about this, and it's not always beatings, right? Sometimes it's just minor indignities, right? Like, okay, if somebody calls a cop on me or somebody's following me in a high-end store, like...
That's most of them. That's what the problem is. I think that's the chunk of but go ahead.
Yeah, but it's not going to hurt me. It can't really affect my life, right? But it is the same processes that lead to people being more likely to be arrested, people being more likely to be the victims of brutality, people being much more likely to be sentenced, to be given longer sentences, to be given the death penalty and all this stuff. It's basically part of the same process, right? The way I see it.
I've been having this exchange that I sent to you. I
read this.
On Letter Wiki with Matt Thornton, I've been following him for a long time, so I have a lot of respect for him. We completely disagree on this because the whole idea is there's a question about systemic racism in police shootings. That was the topic, and it's really focused on the data. Right?
Yeah, which is great.
So I thought that was great because it seems like the people who are denying the systemic racism there are 4 or 5 studies that they have, right? At least 2 of them have been widely criticized, and they show, it's a lot of problems with them. One of them is not peer reviewed. There's another one that's getting all of their reports from police reports that were written by the officers themselves. I mean, so I went in that exchange, and I pointed a lot of these things out. But my main argument there was that you just can't, exactly what you're saying, you can't separate and say, okay, let's look at police shootings and whether systemic race. The word systemic racism, the phrase, 2 words, systemic racism means the entire system. It doesn't even just mean policing. It means criminal justice, like the overall criminal justice system. And people also don't realize that when they talk about police shootings and police killing, Rodney King wasn't shot. George Floyd wasn't shot. Eric Garner wasn't shot. Freddie Gray wasn't shot. Trayvon Martin wasn't shot by police. Okay, Trayvon Martin's the acquittal of George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon Martin, is the reason that Black Lives Matter formed. And that very case would be excluded from this police shootings data because it wasn't a police shooting.
And it would be excluded from a very narrow definition of systemic racism, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
If all you care about is police shootings, and think about it, is, to me, the discussion on police shooting, I'm happy to concede the entire point that I cannot prove that police shootings are more conclusively that police shootings against Black people are more common, right? But even if you grant that the data on it is problematic, okay, even if you grant that, it doesn't invalidate the rest of the complaints, right? Nobody disputes that Black people are more likely to be on the receiving end of police brutality, right? It doesn't even have to be shootings. It can just be brutality.
The very same paper, the Roland Fryer paper, that says that there's no disparities, racial disparities between. So again, problematic, but still, let's accept it at face value. The very same paper also says that Black people are more than 50% more likely than whites to be subject to physical force, other forms of physical force, non-lethal, which is what George Floyd and Rodney King and Eric Garner.
Exactly, right? And again, you notice the other cops standing there not doing anything. Why? Because it probably seemed like standard procedure to them, right? They were just like, well, sometimes you just got to choke a guy. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of distractions in this debate, and nothing gets my blood boiling more than the phrase, "What about Black on Black crime?" I'm like, okay. Imagine this. A housewife who gets beaten by her husband. Then she's brutalized by her boss. You can't say, your husband beats you every day. Therefore, why are you complaining if you're focusing on the one time your boss slapped you, right? It's a completely different scenario. If my dad whoops my ass at home, it doesn't mean that if I go to school, the teacher is entitled to beating me and say, but your dad hits you every day and you don't say anything, It's like, no, this is a completely different issue, right? Like, you have people who are like agents of the state who are supposed to uphold the law, and they have a certain standard of behavior. They have nothing to do with the people in my neighborhood who might want to victimize me. Yes, that's a problem too, right? And I want that to be solved. But right now, just this second, I have formed a group to complain about the first problem, right? Like, just because, I don't know, like, there's so many examples of this.
There's another thing that even, and I agree with you, it's completely a deflectionary tactic.
Yeah.
Right? It's because it has nothing to do with it. If there are 2 topics that we're talking about police brutality, we're talking about systemic racism. Okay, so police brutality affects everybody. It disproportionately affects Black people. It also affects white people. And if you want it to get rid of it, then this protest is trying to get rid of it, and that's going to help everybody. The second thing is systemic racism. Systemic racism does not exist against white people. It does exist against Black people. There's an overwhelming amount of data from everything you said, sentencing, traffic stops, all kinds of stuff. and so that's a separate thing. The black on black crime doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, whenever there's a school shooting, I'm like, oh, okay, there's white on white violence, the white on white event that happened. It just has it's a deflectionary tactic. The other one I see is fatherlessness. That in the black community, a lot of fathers are not there to raise their kids.
Well, therefore, it's okay for a cop to shoot you.
So the fathers, so we're talking about father, and Bill Cosby talked about this, Obama talked about this. I'm sure it's a big discussion within the black community. Every community has their own issues that they show introspection about, but the largest number of people incarcerated in the world, large populations in the U.S.
Yeah.
You've got black people serving sentences for marijuana, for smoking marijuana or having marijuana on them, that are several times higher than white people who did the exact same crime. Yeah.
Hold on a second. Dear God, this is work again.
All right, let's work again.
All right, let's see what's going on here.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about one more thing here. So I was saying the system is biased against people of color. It's police, law, even healthcare. The police come from society. Is there a selection bias in police hiring? Any data on that? So Anwar, there's a couple of problems.
I think maybe she's having maybe it's panic attacks or anxiety attacks or vasovagal syncope or something.
I'm gonna see if I can mute Habib for a second. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so I personally have a problem with the phrase "people of color" because it's very different. I mean, I am more likely to be hired for an IT job if I apply, where someone who's black isn't. I mean, there are some advantages that I might have or an Asian American might have that are just not comparable to the kind of things that black people go through or the kind of things that Hispanic people go through. And people of color is a very broad term. It's kind of like an umbrella term. It's almost racist in a sense because it lumps the experiences and the histories and of all the non-white people under one umbrella. Right? It just puts everybody together, and that's just not the case. Yeah, it's very, very broad. The police do come from society. Is there a selection bias in police hiring? I don't know about that specifically, but when they talk about systemic racism, they're talking about a system of policing that was established during the Jim Crow era and hasn't really been updated. The criminal justice system that was established then. This is the system that actually trains white police officers, black police officers, brown police officers, and everybody. So there is so the bias is, if you have a systemic bias, if it's right at the root of it, it's a kind of thing that will go out and it'll affect all of these people. So you don't, and this is one of the points I made in this exchange was that I can't tell about individual cops. I can't even tell if Derek Chauvin, the guy who killed George Floyd, I don't know if he was racist. I don't know if there was a white guy there, would he have done the same thing to the white guy? He possibly could have. I mean, there are cops who did that to Tony Timpa. Look him up. There's a video of a man called Tony Timpa who was also he was knelt on and held down by white police officers that were joking as he died, and he was killed in pretty much the same way as George Floyd. Could Derek Chauvin have done that? Yes. So I can't really look into his mind. I can't do a sort of a live, real-time fMRI scan in his brain to tell whether he did it out of racism or whether he's just generally an asshole. I think we can all agree that he's an asshole. But what you can talk about is that what you can study is are there racial disparities? Are there racially disparate outcomes that are coming as a result of these actions? And there is data on that. So I think that people do internalize, that there is implicit bias. You can be black and you can still internalize some of the racism that is in the system. You can be a woman and you can think that, wearing a burqa is a symbol of liberation. You can be a conservative gay man and you think it's great to vote for Republicans who may want to deny your rights. So these contradictions can happen all the time. Hey, Habib, you're back. Are you back or you gotta go?
I'm back for now.
Back for now. This
Yeah.
is good. This is not bad, actually. So,
Yeah.
yeah, we were talking. So, Anwar is, so he's saying that I'm kind of missing the question, but there's a comment here. He's saying the system is biased against people of color. It's police, law, even healthcare. The police come from society. Is there a selection bias in police hiring? Is there any data on that?
I haven't seen it, and it's quite possible that there will be a selection bias in police hiring, but I want to move away from the idea that it's bad people doing this, right? Because, just like in medicine, I think in the US, we've shown that Black patients get their pain ignored more frequently than lighter skinned patients, right?
Mm.
But this isn't just something that white doctors do to Black patients, right? This is something that we all do, right? Including Black doctors.
That's exactly what I was saying when you were away.
And so even if, you hire more Black cops or more Latino cops, unless you change the culture and structure of policing, you're not going to get different outcomes. Because if the job of policing is let's go arrest Black people and put them in jail, right? I'm saying it in a kind of politically incorrect fashion, but if that's basically what it sums up, what it becomes, then even if you hire a Black person, you're going to train them to just go do the thing that you do, which is go arrest more Black people and put them in jail, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a conversation that I would like to see. And I think that some of us are making that argument, but it's not really getting enough traction and salience. Like, it's not about, oh my God, this guy's a racist piece of shit. Let's get rid of all the racist piece of shits in the police department and we're going to be great. It's more like, no, how was this policing pattern established? Who determines and what determines where we go police? What determines what our goals are, right? And how do we know that we're not policing in a way that results in biased outcomes against a certain group, right? And if we are, then let's have the data gathering in place that lets us see that and lets us fix it in real time, right? With periodic reevaluations to make sure that we're going in the right direction, So yeah, you can hire the more diverse workforce, but I don't think it's going to make an iota of a difference, or at least not very much of one.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying as well. That you can't really peek into the mind of every police officer to see if they're racist or not, or what was motivating them. You can't do that. That's not something you can even study. You just have to go by their word. But what you can look at is just the overall the data in the system, and you can use that to potentially make policy decisions. There is a problem though with the way that you get the data as well. So I think when there are people who say, well, data is king, we should only trust the data, everything else is anecdotal, forget about individual experiences, they don't make a difference. That is not, there's a problem with that. People say that's an anti-intellectual argument. It actually isn't. It's a pro-critical argument. You have to be critical about the data when it's coming from the very people who have the power to cover it up, who are the ones who are under fire, when they're the ones providing you the data, and that's your source of the data.
And who have a documented history of falsifying evidence.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, whoever, that. And there's the other, and when you study this stuff, you have to look at, like, for example, anytime you're looking at, this is, I think Laura Bronner had a great piece on 538, which I know you read as well, on collider bias. Right, the whole idea of when you have, if you're denominator, you're supposed to be looking at all possible encounters of police, and then you're supposed to pick out the encounters that actually, the encounters that actually happen, the actual encounters over all possible encounters. The nature of police reporting is that the only time you're actually going to report, you can have a report, is when it reaches the threshold of an encounter, right?
Exactly.
So what you're doing is you're working with an already biased sample, and in addition to that, there are racist elements in other parts of other tributaries that are feeding the river, and when the tributaries themselves are contaminated, right, that you are not likely to get a very representative idea just from the data alone. So this is just one of many different complications there are, specifically when you're studying police shootings. Right? So it's so we have to, like, this whole idea of making a data god in this kind of situation is difficult. I give the example of how, rape rates in Sweden,
Yeah, I read that.
the highest rape rate in the world. The most rapes happen in Sweden, whereas in Saudi Arabia, so Sweden has 135 times more rapes than Saudi Arabia.
Of course.
34 times or 24 times more rapes than India.
Also, many more gay people.
Many more gay. I wonder why.
Yeah.
So of course that data is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not true. That's not the case. There's no way that there are more rapes happening in Sweden than there are in India.
Yeah.
Per population as a percentage. We are skeptical of that data for the right reasons, and that's the same. Those are the same reasons we should be skeptical. We should use it as guidance, but I think we should be skeptical of the data. But how do you handle the sort of the skeptics who say, I have friends, I have like really good friends who just don't think there is systemic racism against Black people anymore. That happened a long time ago. And I got to tell you something. A lot of these friends are from within minority groups, Asian people, brown, South Asian people.
That is actually really challenging, right? Because I hinted at that earlier when I was talking about how immigrants in general relate to, to Black Americans. It's very hard. And actually, I don't know that I have a solution, right? I mean, there's just a lot of people who are going to be just very skeptical, period. And people, I think we think of ourselves as a species that, gathers evidence and then we reach a conclusion. But more often than not, the vast majority of the time, we reach a conclusion and then we go fish for whatever data we can to bolster it, right? Right. And so if people have already decided that Black Americans are more criminally minded and therefore deserving of being watched more closely and therefore deserving of whatever consequences might ensue from that policing, it's going to be very hard to move their opinions, right? I think the biggest thing that I've ever seen that's moved people's opinions has been this George Floyd thing, right? Which is not actually an intellectual argument so much as an emotional one, right? It just showed an illustration. I guess theoretically speaking, you could also make the argument that, this was a one-time thing, or, this isn't representative of most of policing. And yet people saw this and reacted in such a way that it seems like they've understood that this is actually not a one-time thing. This is actually emblematic of what people have been complaining about. It just took this one illustration to show it, even though theoretically that's not how you would go about it. You would gather a lot more data and say, see, look at this data. But what I've noticed is that in conversations, most people are not moved by data. If the data is pointing to a conclusion that is antithetical to the conclusions they've reached ahead of time, they're going to take it here with the data. It's not going to go anywhere, So I have very little faith in my power to persuade other people,
I have, okay, so I'm going to actually read you out something in response to this letter. And I'm not saying this is a norm or anything, but the letter wiki exchange that I had.
Yeah.
So I want to, and just on this topic about whether you can change minds or not, right? I'll show you like one over here. Oh, crap. We're not watching this.
It says, Ali,
can you see it?
I can see it, but I feel like I'm 60 years old and I can't see anymore.
No, it's actually out of focus. That's why.
It's way out of focus.
So I'll just read it out. It says, Ali, you have definitely swayed my position. I appreciate all of the insight. That's one.
That's awesome.
Another one from someone called Phoenix Blade is, good job changing my mind, sir.
Wow.
Made a compelling series of arguments. Then my friend Iona Italia, who's, she's actually a really good writer herself and a podcaster. She said, wow, Ali's responses to Matt have completely changed my view on systematic racism within U.S. police. Wow. Great points made by both, though, but a really thoughtful and courageous approach to an inflammatory topic. Now, that's like three of a handful of others, and it's not a universal phenomenon. It's not. This is just something. But and this is something I've noticed, like even with my other work with
Mhm.
that I do with, just being a anti-Islamic
Yeah,
blasphemer, an
yeah,
apostate, and atheist
yeah.
activist, is that you get people telling you that you change their mind.
Yeah. I mean, I get that on Quora too sometimes, but
I
I
think you do
just
that a lot. Yeah.
I just stopped expecting it. Right. I had a lot more missionary zeal and faith in my own powers when I was younger. I think like you get more jaded over time, and it comes as a nice surprise when people say, "Hey, you actually changed my mind on this topic." I'm like, "Wow!" So the topic on which I changed some people's mind that made me really happy. This was last year. Was the Ukraine story about Trump, where I did a write up of like the text messages that had been exchanged between Gordon Sutherland, ambassador to Ukraine, and I forget who else was involved in that. But I was like, hey, this is the story. And I had people who were like, oh my God, you're right. He needs to
Yeah.
be impeached. And those people weren't like hardcore lefties. They were like, not super right of center, but like right of center. I was like, wow, I've changed minds.
I'm telling you it happens. But I will give you this: that more than writing about data and showing all of that, that
Yeah.
appeals to people who know about the data.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I did here. But what really changes minds
It's
more
the
than
emotional
anything,
stuff, right?
is the emotional. You
Yeah.
have to, there's a story when you have George Floyd. I could give you a statistic saying, okay, this many black people
Yeah.
are suffocated to death,
Yeah.
and all this stuff. People are like, okay, they're going to process it cerebrally.
Yep.
But when you watch that video and you see the story of this is one person,
Yeah.
anecdotal,
Yep.
right? And it moves you and it hits you that this is wrong. Then
Yeah.
when somebody else comes up and says, hey, you know what you're seeing? I'm not shocked about this because this has been happening to us for a long time. Then you'd be like, you know what? Shit. I
Yeah.
never saw this before. That's how it works.
No one has ever rioted because of a statistic.
No, it hasn't been. There you go. That's a
Like,
classic.
whoa, my paper here has shown that our justice system is messed up. Yeah, let's go like print up some graphs and charts and go write about this stuff. Am I right? This
Oh yeah.
I think incidentally, it's a slightly different topic, but this is why Elizabeth Warren isn't as popular as Bernie Sanders, because she's very professorial and she wants to talk to you like a professor in law school.
Yeah.
And he is much better at hitting people's emotions than she is.
I gotta tell you one thing. It's the same thing with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton was the lady who gave out handouts after each lecture with a bullet point list, and whereas Trump just had a nice "Make America Great Again," build the wall, lock her up. I mean, he had a story.
Yeah.
Obama had a story. John Kerry did not have a story.
That
He
is
didn't have. He was professorial as well. And I gotta say, Biden is also very good at emotionally connecting.
That's true.
He is a great storyteller in that sense.
I think we educated liberals quite often tend to underestimate the power of being able to make that emotional connection, right? Because the vast majority of my writing online is I'm gonna go make a statistical point about this is the data we got. I'm gonna make a point about this. This is the conclusion from the data. But it doesn't move anybody.
It doesn't, and that's if you want to make a change. And this is the thing, when people talk about tearing down statues and all that, I'm like, okay, I disagree with this. I don't want. I mean, there's some statues that I don't. Like you said, I don't lose sleep over. But there is an emotional reaction, and that gets people. Any kind of movement you had, and I've mentioned it. I don't know how many times, but you needed a Rosa Parks who was quiet and just refused silently. You needed the Martin Luther King, who was a politician, who was sort of diplomatic, and then you needed the Malcolm X. I mean, all of them were. These were people who did a feminist movement. The same thing. You needed the people who were lobbying government for reproductive rights, like Gloria Steinem, and then you also needed the radicals who were burning their bras.
Yeah, you need the people who are angry and marching in the streets, because if it was left up to me, we'd be like, we think this law should change.
That's been happening forever. People have been doing that forever. Like complying and negotiating with the police is kind of what got George Floyd killed.
Yeah, I mean, again, I am not somebody you're going to see at a protest just by my nature of it, but I appreciate the hell out of the people who are doing it. Especially, what has been really gratifying is seeing large numbers of white people who presumably don't have anything to lose.
Yeah,
They're protesting, chanting Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I'm witnessing this. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it is amazing. It is amazing.
So I have a comment here from Gisela Foster saying, okay, she's saying, the no racism is bull. I'm a German immigrant. Yes, Habib, George Floyd changed a few people's mind. White people feel this racism by watching George Floyd. And she adds that emotion did it this time.
Yeah.
That's a comment. And then there's a question from Mars. And this is another thing I wanted to ask you about anyway. So let's, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but unless you have nowhere to go.
Well, until they call me again.
So he's saying, what are your perspectives on the entirety of the BLM movement? Most would rightly support the implied narrative behind the slogan, but people have concerns about some of their aims.
Okay, this is a great question, and
Yes,
it's actually one of my favorite topics to talk about. So,
great.
the strength of Black Lives Matter is just how easy it is to join, right? I consider myself part of the Black Lives Matter movement, okay?
Mhm.
But all I do is I write posts online, right? I don't go out there, like I don't go out to protest, right? I reach a bunch of people, but like you're not going to see me ever leading like a chant or a march through town. Although if Trump loses, I might be tempted to go out there screaming in the street, but that's a different topic, right? Black Lives Matter, to me, all it is saying, we don't want racism in policing and in the criminal justice system as a whole, right? If that is part of your aim, then you're basically part of the movement as long as you're out there speaking up, right? Whatever your method of speaking up is. Now, because the movement is so decentralized, it comes with weaknesses. It comes with the local chapters are not really getting directives from anybody, right? If I want to call my little protest that I'm doing in front of Pizza Hut a Black Lives Matter protest, there's nothing stopping me from doing it. All I need is a couple of guys in t-shirts and a couple of signs, right? And that's it. All of a sudden, I've got a Black Lives Matter protest. If I decide to do something super asinine at my protest, or I say something like, all white people are racist, or something stupid, right? That can, somebody can take a snapshot of that and publicize it on all the conservative media sources, and all of a sudden it's this Black Lives Matter official is saying something, blah, 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 blah. But really, it's not an organization so much as a hashtag. It's a movement. It's like a 21st century movement where it's so decentralized. It's just, there's no leader. There's nobody you go to say, negotiate with this person, Congress, right? It's just people pushing together. And it's good because you can mobilize people really quickly. It's bad because it lends itself to being caricatured, right? Hijacked and caricatured very, very easily. So when people say that Black Lives Matter has problematic aims, I don't know. I take issue with it. I don't think Black Lives Matter has problematic aims. I think the aims are, let's have a better criminal justice system that doesn't discriminate on people, right? Let's have cops who don't shoot people willy-nilly because, it's better if you have cops who don't try to kill you if they don't have to, right? But you're always going to have individuals who are very problematic, right? Whether it's because of what they say or what they do, or they're breaking down statues, they're burning, looting, stealing, saying some asinine things about all white people. But that's not the movement. That's just some idiot who presumably, if that person had been a Muslim or a Buddhist or a communist, would have been a Muslim or Buddhist or communist idiot, right? Like that person, this is their thing. This is what they would have done. You put them in the French Revolution, they would have done the same exact, some version of the same stupid stuff, right? You shouldn't mistake the whole movement for the excesses of the worst people among it, right? And if you are against a movement, you will never lack for examples and illustrations of useful idiots.
That's the thing. That's the thing. If you are already against, opposed to a movement, or opposed to like the very basic thing, like you'll talk, and I've talked to people about this. Like, okay, I just don't like Black Lives Matter. I don't like what they stand for. And they'll start with, they say they want to smash the patriarchy and they're anti-Israel. They think that the world's being taken over by Zionists. So are there people like that? Yep.
Yeah, of course.
Farrakhan's like that, and he's an asshole. And there are and then you move from that. You're like, okay, that's not the majority.
Yeah.
You tell them that that's not. I don't agree with that either. But at the thrust, it's really about this. It's about police shootings. Like,
Yeah.
well, police shootings data shows that, not a lot of, okay, fine. But it's not just police shootings. Most of
Yeah.
these people weren't shot.
Yeah.
A lot of them were just brutalized by police
Yeah.
disproportionately because of systemic racism. Like, well, I don't really know if systemic racism exists. And then you think, I'm like, okay, you are just, you're probably just against
You're
this.
just against. That's it, right?
I can give you, and I really can, I'm not exaggerating here, I can give you about 120 studies that show systemic racism exists. Well, you can't really tell that's racism. It's not because of, how do you know it's not because of it's because of the actual skin color.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there are 3 independent studies show that there are judges that looked at, divided up defendants into white skin, light skin, medium skin, and dark skin. There are like 2 or 3 studies done like that. All of them showed progressively longer sentences the darker the skin got, statistically significant differences. Well, that's not really the police, that's the judge, right? So it's just like, we're talking about systemic racism. Do you know what it means? And like at that time, then you realize, okay, this person or these people are just kind of against the movement that just have a problem with.
But you can say that, right? It's kind of impolitic. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I lost you for a second. I'm like, oh my god.
No.
Okay.
Not at this time.
It's not like politically, it's not socially acceptable to say, I do not support police reform, right? I think it's great for police to go out there and shoot people, and I think the police should be shooting black people at the exact same rate that they're doing right now. It's not socially acceptable to say that, but it's acceptable to say, well, I don't think, I don't like some of the things that they're doing. That's a lot more socially acceptable than saying I'm an opponent of this movement that ostensibly wants to prevent black people from being, and everybody really, it's not just a black thing, right? This movement that ostensibly wants to reform the police in America, or the justice system in America. So, it's what I've learned is almost like when you have an argument with somebody about, I don't know, Donald Trump, whatever it is. There is the thing that you're ostensibly arguing about above the surface, but below the surface is where the real deal is, right?
Yeah. There is, below the surface is where the real deal is, and I think this is an interesting. This isn't a question from. Oh, first of all, Gisela was saying BLM says we have had enough. I wanted to stop. That is the aim. I think that's basically what it is. Matt is asking, Matt Rose, what is your view on the other BLM group that's Marxist? So Matt, this is kind of what we were both talking about, and I'll let Habib also mention this, but I want to give you an example. Like, I know that I've seen you in our sort of secular jihadist podcast, the other podcasts I do, and the atheist movement, the ex-Muslim movement that I've been a part of for a very long time, there are Marxists there too. There are SAWs. There is like woke people. There are intellectual dark IDWs. And these are all sort of like mini cults of their own. Yeah. There are far right people, right? One of the sort of the former editor-in-chiefs for Breitbart in London, Raheem Kassam, is an ex-Muslim. So a lot of these people, there's a lot of ex-Muslim Trump supporters. There's a lot of ex-Muslim Bernie people. There's a lot of people in the middle of the road. I mean, they're everywhere. There's people who support Marxism, and you see that that's what it is. It's a decentralized movement. The beautiful thing, and this is a beautiful thing. People talk about it like it's a bad thing. Well, it's decentralized. It's not like they have a pope. Well, who the fuck wants a pope? Like, why do you want it when you have
Catholics?
Why do we want to perpetuate this idea that all black people must think alike when it comes to this thing, or all Muslims or ex-Muslims must think alike and have the same opinions? We don't, and there is a lot of bickering. There's a lot of internal. There's people who there are black people I've talked to in the BLM movement that are not fans of what Antifa is doing. They don't like it.
Yeah,
they feel like what Antifa has actually given them a really bad look. There's others who think that Louis Farrakhan having the position that he has in the Nation of Islam is just damaging what they're trying to achieve by just giving ammunition to the far right and the people who are trying to stop them. And these kinds of things happen when you have something this big. You're always going to have some level of factionism.
Yep.
and people are just going to disagree with each other. I mean, this
Yep.
just happens in every movement. That doesn't mean I don't support ex-Muslims. Doesn't mean I don't support atheists. It doesn't support think that. It doesn't mean that I think all of their movements are illegitimate. It just
Yeah.
means that there's ideological diversity in it, and
Yep.
diversity is what we're all about.
There's always a lot of heterogeneity in all these movements, right?
Yeah.
And so you're going to see some Marxists, you're going to see some people who want to emphasize one aspect or another. But the bottom line is everybody is calling for an end to police brutality and to just a bad biased justice system in general. And that's really all that matters at the end of the day, you know. Yeah.
Have you come across any of the sort of writings and podcasts and things like that of some of these sort of conservative academic like John McWhorter and Glenn Lowry?
I'll tell you, I actually enjoy the hell out of John McWhorter. He is one of the thinkers that I like.
Yeah, me too. Coleman Hughes is. Have you heard of Coleman Hughes?
I haven't read it.
He's a young guy, but he's a really, really smart guy. He's kind of, I mean, he's pretty much just the John McWhorter.
Yeah,
thing. It's like he has pretty much the same kind of view. But
yeah, send me a link to him later. I'm going to look it up. I think again, I appreciate pushback. Okay, one of the things that I think is possible to do is to surround yourself with people who agree with you on all facets of these things. And then you learn to dismiss everything that the other side says, right?
Yeah.
Whatever. You're racist. Shut up. Whatever. But sometimes that pushback allows you to refine your argument and to make sure that your argument is airtight, right? Before you present it. And so one of the arguments that John McWhorter will make sometimes is that there is this new force called anti-racism, which is, as a word, means something differently from just being against racism. It is a notion that you have to be out there actively being an anti-racist, otherwise you're kind of part of the problem, right? And that with this kind of missionary zeal, it comes with its own excesses, and it comes with the marginalization of people who are just basically going by their own business, doing nothing. And I'm very sympathetic to that, right? I have a bunch of white friends, and I have a lot of people who I'm like, you're not an activist? That's fine, right? I don't need every single person to be an activist. When there's a sheriff race next time in your location, if all you have in your power to do, all you have within you to do is to go vote for the guy who wants to reform the police, I will take your support. Okay, I don't need you to go out there denouncing anybody. Just once in a while, there's a district attorney's race in your vicinity. Please go vote for the person who wants to reform the police and supports body cams. That's all I'm asking of you, right?
Yeah,
I'm okay with this gradation of everybody's welcome, do what you can. What I sometimes see is that some people take their missionary zeal so seriously that if you're not 100% on board with every single thing they say, dear God.
Yeah.
All right, I gotta answer this.
Yeah, take it.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. So, so as we know, Habib is on call tonight, so he is taking some calls. I mean, this is on the eve of July 4th, so he's taking another call. Now, so I wanted to kind of get back to what Habib was talking about right now as well, with John McWhorter and Matt Rose's comments here about, I think he's talking about Joe Rogan's latest podcast with James Lindsay, that he points out that there are 4 BLM groups, and this really goes down to the same kind of thing, that we were talking about, is that you're always going to have, with a movement that's so big, and we're again talking about the largest protest movement in the history of the United States now, right? The recent movement that after the death of George Floyd is that if it's that massive, you are going to have ideological diversity. And I think it's a really good thing that even within the Black community, right, it's not, people think of, not obviously not all Black people think alike. They are just as ideologically diverse as any other group, right? But one thing that they all agree on, the cultural Marxists, and this is what Habib was talking about, cultural Marxists, whether you have somewhat liberal people. You have more sort of far left or more further left of liberal people, like Bernie supporters and so on, is that they all agree on one thing, that there needs to be reform in police. Now, that can take the shape of, some people may say, okay, well, we want to defund the police, which is a really bad slogan. Others may say we want to abolish the police, which is actually a completely ridiculous idea. But in all of these cases, there is an understanding that there needs to be some level of police reform, right? And Habib, you're back. So again, this was a question from Matt Rose. I mean, he was talking again about how there's 4 different BLM groups. And I was saying, there are some positions like, there's some groups that say reform the police. There's some people that say defund it. There's also an article, I think Ilhan Omar was saying, you got to, abolish the police completely. And so, and this is, I think, what it comes down to. And if I got what you were saying correctly, is that if you have this person, they're going in, they're like, okay, we need reform in police, and that's the thing. And all of these people who think any of these things will go and vote for the person who wants to reform the police.
Yeah.
And that's really what counts in the end.
Yeah.
Right? What you're saying?
Yeah. And I guess I'm going to have to answer this, and then I'll have to go. This patient
Sure.
is not doing super well, and I have to get it transferred to another service. But that's neither here. Thing about that is, there are a lot of people, again, I was talking about, there's a lot of heterogeneity, right? There's a lot of differences in between, variance between what different people want to do in the movement. But there are things that there's broad agreement on, right? Let's reform the police, right? Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the slogan defund the police, especially since most of them say, well, we don't actually mean defund, we just means reduce the budget and divert the budget and send it, spend the money on other policy priorities.
Change the slogan if you have to explain it so much.
I know.
Why is this?
Why do you do this? This is like, you're already losing. If your first slogan is something you have to be defensive about, you're already losing, right? The vast majority of people, if you were to get some poll on it, which I don't have a poll, but if you were to do some polling on it, you would find that there was broad agreement on reforming the police, and that those voices that want to do something more radical, like entirely defund or, God forbid, abolish the police or something, are a fringe group, right? And
they're French,
they're fringe groups, and they really don't have much political power. They have visibility because of Twitter and social media and all this stuff. But the average voter on the left is listening to these people and going, what the fuck? What are you talking about? Like, what are you, You want to do what? No, shut up, go away, right? Most of us are like, no, I don't want no police. Obviously, I want the police. Like, you need the police. There's a reason why it exists, right? If people say, okay, in our community, we're going to experiment with a different form of police, we're going to call it whatever else. It's going to be a brand new force. We're going to do brand new recruitment and all this stuff. I don't mind. I really don't care. But you need some kind of force that is going to be there to enforce the rules, because criminality isn't going to go away. You just want that force not to become a deputized gang that is not accountable for its wrongdoing, and you want them to be treating all citizens equally, regardless of their demographic characteristics and their origins. Right? That's basically it. Abolish the police, like nobody cares about. Nobody takes that seriously.
Yeah. So there are fringe groups. So I know you got to go. So I'm just gonna kind of there's a thing from Mars. He's very happy, and Mars like, oh, I'm gonna convince Habib to show up on Secular Jihadists as well on a day when he's free.
Hopefully not when I'm on call, right?
No, not when you're on call. But this is great. I think we have so much more to talk about, and I'm just looking forward to getting your ideas. Again, look for Habib Fanny on Quora. He's on. He has some of the most insightful answers, and if you are a fan of data, and if you're a fan of evidence, you are going to love the way that he presents his answers, and that's why he's got such a huge following of close to 100,000 people.
I guess
already.
You like data, huh? A little bit.
Oh, they do like data.
Online.
No, but you're absolutely right about what you said about Twitter. Is if you go by Twitter, Jeremy Corbyn would have been Prime Minister of the U.S.
Yeah.
Sorry, Prime Minister of the UK.
I'm like, hey, that's pretty good. I'll take a Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Why not?
And Bernie Sanders wouldn't have lost every county in Michigan
Yeah.
And Biden, who was absolutely hated, would not be the nominee. I mean, it's just a completely thing. I mean, people often say, okay, no, this is a fringe. When you say this is a fringe, like, no, it's not a fringe. Check out these tweets from so and so. And like, these tweets don't mean that. Actually probably shows more that it's a fringe than anything else. So, but that's another thing that we can talk about later on. But yeah, I'll let you go, everybody. The book is called "A Gazelle Ate My Homework." Right, a journey from the Ivory Coast to America, from African to Black, and from undocumented to doctor. That's just part of the subtitle. It's actually longer than that, but I'll keep that for you guys.
It's good enough. It's close enough, right?
Yeah. So Habib, hey man, thank you so much. And I think we had a couple of technical difficulties, but I think fantastic.
Well,
is there anything else?
Man. Not really. I'm down to have another talk whenever.
Yeah.
But yeah, these are interesting times to live in, and I'm happy to be part of it in my own small way.
Right. And any prediction for what do you think the way that it looks? I mean, we already talked about this, but
2020. I mean, if you were to ask me to put money on it, I'm gonna say at the very least House and President, but Senate is looking better and better every day. Because again, fewer and fewer people are doing split ticket voting, right? And so you're going to get, if you have a big wave where, Biden has a 9 percentage point lead, that means a Democratic Senate, no question about it.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I can't wait for November, man.
Yeah. Habib's a physician. Read his stuff on what he says about the coronavirus and the COVID pandemic. He is also, he's an African immigrant and an African American, has some really interesting views on Black Lives Matter, some of which may surprise you. And he is a really, really good analyst of U.S. politics, actually. So I follow you quite avidly on that. Okay, anyway.
Thank you.
I'll let you go. Thank you, Habib. Thank you, everybody else, for listening in.
All right.
And I'll put this up. This is going to be on iTunes at some point in the next few days. So we'll see you guys then. Take care.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. I will
leave.